And now we're going to move on to our first panel discussion of the afternoon, ladies and gents. This topic is global challenges for education, economics, environment and emergency. So again, this is going to be another interesting discussion. And to moderate this panel, someone that I have had the pleasure of chatting to over the last few days, who I must say is wonderful, Zena Simmons. If we could invite Zena to the stage. Round of applause, everybody. So Zena is insurance broker, medical student, missionary and public health professional of ZLS agency. So thank you, Zena. Zena is going to moderate this panel. Enjoy, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'd like to introduce the two other panelists that's going to be joining us today. The first is Anam. I'll introduce. Okay. The second I would like to introduce is Dr. Jossan, Jossan. And just a little bit of a correction, Anam is actually the moderator for today. She's going to be asking questions because she was originally the one that was preparing them.
Okay. Thank you. So good afternoon to this wonderful audience in front of me. Welcome to today's panel discussion. It has been such an amazing 3 days, and thank you to the entire team of the Education 2.0 conference for arranging such a well-organized event. So today's topic of discussion is global challenges of education, economics, environment, and emergency. We've already introduced our panelists over here, Zena and Dr. Anu. Do I need an introduction again, if that's okay? That's fine. All right. It's a very valid discussion today in this day and age, as we are facing these critical challenges right now as we speak, whether it be wars, epidemics, natural disasters, climate change, and economic and social inequalities. These are proven barriers, not only in education, but across all disciplines and industries. So today we'll split the discussion into 4 key questions related to the challenges. Then we'll have Dr. Anu and Zena talk about the outcomes and solutions, and conclude the discussion with question and answers from the audience. So we understand, Dr. Anu and Zena, that the economy plays a huge role in education, as it does with other fields and businesses and industries. So what are the economic challenges to education? We can start with Dr. Anu, and then Zena can continue with the rest.
Hi, everyone. So in terms of economics, I think we are living in the worst time because we don't know what to predict about the future. We are under recessionary pressures, inflation. So I'm an economist, so I will use these kind of jargons because that's how we teach, that's how we talk. So when we think about recession and inflation and see it in the perspective of education, how it affects the core stakeholders. Let's talk about students, for example, right? So we have prospective students who want to join in a university or a school and think in terms of recessionary pressures. You know, there will be high tuition fees, for example, high, student loans. We are hearing this news about interest rates hikes, right? So student loans will be much costlier than before, and tuition fees are not going to come down, right? So for the students, it will be a costly affair. So that will be one of the economic challenge which we are going to face in the coming years. Inflation is not going to go down in any near future. Recession also started with many countries, starting with UK now, and all the other countries are going to face this inflationary, recessionary pressures, right? So it's a reality for the students. Now, another perspective for the existing students, let's talk about employability, right? During recession, we see a lot of unemployment and job loss, right? And the new students who just finished their graduate degree or a master's degree, they'll find it very difficult to get a job because the demand for laborers, it's more based on experience. And our students, do not have much experience. They are just passed out from the university. And if it's a recessionary time, it's going to be really difficult to find jobs. So for the existing students, for the new students, both of them face the same really difficult times ahead. Now let's talk about the university. University is going to face high tax rates, high operating expenses. They might need to cut down staff, okay? So it's going to be economically challenging for the university as well. So if you see it in many angles, we live in a time with great uncertainty. So I see as the economic challenges ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for making those points. I agree with everything that you mentioned. I think also too, I always talk about policy making and the effects that it has on education when I talk about, getting down to the issues that exist with education. So if we're taking an educational system standpoint, the government is very responsible for providing the resources that are necessary for education systems, right? So distribution is very important. The way that resources are distributed within countries and then between different countries. And then also it's always important to address the chunk of the world, right? So in a lot of people in other countries like third world systems, they don't even have resources at all to even go to school. Whereas like in first world countries like Dr. Anam was talking about or Dr. Jossan mentioned, they are well resourced, but there are still challenges within those school systems, right? So I noticed even in the United States, whenever there are budget cuts, education is almost like the first thing that is cut, right? Extracurriculars are very important. We always talk about experiential learning. So we want to make sure that students are not just learning in classrooms, but they're also building technical skills, building social skills and professional skills, and getting involved in extracurriculars are necessary for that. So we need to make sure that funding is distributed evenly to fund those types of activities. I mentioned the other day that I do a lot of mission work in impoverished nations, and sometimes it's as simple, the issues that exist there are literally just because they don't have schools at all, right? And then there are barriers to getting to schools or receiving those educational resources. They don't have access to them. So those are the main economic challenges that I wanted to discuss.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for your insight. So, Dr. Anu, when we talk about all these high operating expenses, right? So which means the students have to pay a higher fees in that case. So are we really giving students a holistic experience with such high fees, do you think, at the moment?
See, when there is a recessionary pressure, tuition fee is not going to be changed. Like it will be the same, but it will be a big burden for the student.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine like they need to discontinue, or their parents are not able to support because they lost their job, right? Then it becomes a burden, right? Otherwise, during the recessionary times, it's not going to be that the fees is going to go up. It becomes burden. The students will be more burdened. If their support is going to be cut out, they need to discontinue their education, become a burden.
Let's move on to the next questions. So when we talk about the environment, it not only refers to the climate crisis and global warming, but the environment which we grow in which we grow and learn, which are the communities and we live in, and the schools we go to, the universities we go to. So what, according to you, Zena, I'll start with you. What, according to you, are the environmental challenges to the education industry?
So yeah, that's a very good question. There are a lot of environmental challenges when it comes to education in terms of climate, right? But also just regular environment. Some of the climate challenges that exist can happen in tropical places. It can happen in places that are very cold. And sometimes they kind of become barriers in ways that people wouldn't even think. I can give like a personal example. Being from New Jersey originally, there was one year we had so many snowstorms that we had to push back our graduation, and it was pushed back so much because we had so many snow days that we couldn't apply to certain colleges. So there were some people that didn't get to go to the school of their dreams, or there were some universities that may have, some people would have been eligible to get full ride scholarships that couldn't go there, right? So those climate challenges exist. Sometimes also if a hurricane hits or a snowstorm hits, some schools don't have educational systems put in place to make sure that they're making up for that lost time and supplementing the education that's lost, especially for students that are very young. I know someone mentioned the other day that the first 7 years of a child's life is their optimal time to absorb information. You absorb the most when you're young. You're like a sponge. So if you're missing time because of natural disasters or having to sit out of school, then students are obviously not getting the critical years of development that they're meant to have during that time. Another thing when we talk about environment outside of climate change and whatever else is just as simple as providing suitable environments for students to learn in. So you need to have a healthy environment in order for you to reach your full potential and to thrive as a student, especially at a young age, because you are developing, and those are the critical years of your life. So when we talk about environment, the two main areas, right, for children is the home and at school. So it's the parents' responsibility to provide suitable environments for their children so that they're emotionally happy, mentally healthy. And then schools also need to make sure to provide suitable environments for students to thrive in. And part of that is just offering the right resources for students, and then also just promoting inclusion and providing students with enough support that they need to succeed.
Thank you, Dr. Anam.
To continue with what you were mentioning about climate change and global warming, how much we are inculcating to respect the nature and about sustainability in our curriculum for an education, right? When we take, when I take classes, even though I take classes for the college students, I mentioned that, and I live in Doha, and most of my students are religious, so I just touch point on one thing. I tell them, if you believe that God has created you, okay, God has created the animals, the plants, then they are your siblings. You need to take care of that, right? We can tell that, but in how much we include this in the curriculum, our youngsters taught to respect the nature. That's a challenge. They never know about it. Unless and until it's included in the curriculum, it's not going to be a focus. If you want to address the climate change and the global warming issues, we can talk a lot about it, but it's not getting solved anywhere. So that's one of the challenges which we have. Another challenge which I feel in terms of environment is a socio-cultural challenge. We're not living in a society like before. There is a big generation gap. We are living in a time of selfie culture. Everyone thinks about themselves. They don't think about others, right? But there are so many marginalized students in our university and in our school. I will call them as socially invisible. They are not visible. We as teachers, our job is to take classes, we finish our classes and we leave. Do we know these problems that they are facing? We don't know. How are we including that? And the other aspect which I want to mention about the diverse culture we have, diverse type of people we have, how tolerant we are to others, how much it is included in our education. It's a challenge. It's a big challenge. If we do not teach our students about this, or we don't openly talk about it, it will never become an issue for tolerance. Nobody will tolerate. They are born and brought up in such an environment where they do not have tolerance, or they are like a group of people, they do not like group of people, the open-mindedness will not be there. So I think socioeconomic challenges, environment and nature challenges, but sociocultural challenges are deep-rooted. We need to make a big change. It's a challenge for us.
All right. So when we talk about obviously the well-being and the sustainability and getting the environment part of the curriculum, so how can we do that? How can it be integrated within school curriculums and within universities as well?
Yeah, this was one of the mention I made in the first panel as well. Creative thinking, critical thinking, design-based education. These are the new terms which we need to incorporate in our education. Now, for example, when we bring in design-based education with these critical steps it has, it includes iteration of feedbacks. It includes teamwork. It includes, the voice. Whatever you want to mention, whatever change we want to bring, it includes there. It's not like a traditional classroom where the teacher talks and the student listen. It's not like that. We are giving an open forum for our students to talk to us. They are finding out solution. They are thinking beyond the box. So design-based education is one good way to incorporate this challenge. And these are all transferable skills. How can you tolerate somebody at office, for example? You learn it by experience. But sometimes, put our students into group, they find it really difficult. And we always tell them, you are going to face office where you cannot tell to the other person that I cannot work with you. You have to work. So it's not something which cannot be solved, but they don't know about it. So we need to talk about this. We need to have an open environment where the students can talk and we can give them feedback and give them chance to improve. And for that, inculcating critical thinking, creative thinking, design-based education into the system. Now, these are all applicable to any streams of education. It's not specific to innovation or design. It can be applied even to economics, for example, or for data science. So having these in the stream as a lifestyle, like a lifestyle, embedded, that's what we wanted.
I just wanted to touch up on some, I don't know where it fits, but we look at online degrees and the massive open online courses as well. People kind of opt for these degrees because obviously the environmental challenges are there, the financial struggles are there. So they're not still considered as real degrees in many parts of the world. So are we going to see a global acceptance of these in the near future?
So that's a good question. I think that it depends. The way people view online degrees are basically opinionated, right? So we can't expect that in a few years everyone is going to see online degrees as something that's fully acceptable and just as valuable as an in-person degree. I think that there was a major shift after the pandemic. A lot of schools, well, most schools had to revert to online learning and remote learning. In my opinion, I would not say that online degrees are not as important, but it depends on the type of learner that you are. I think they're just as valuable because you had to study the material, you learned the material, but sometimes, I believe Zoom is just for convenience, but that's how I learn. I like to actually sit in the classroom. I like to gain experiential learning experiences. Some people are better remote learners. They like to study in isolation. They like to block out all distractions whatsoever. So it depends on the type of learner you are. And when we talk about improving school systems and educational systems, I think it is important to give students that flexibility to learn the way that they best learn, and not judge or put stigmas on the types of degrees that people attain or obtain.
Dr. Anu, since you're a university professor yourself, what's your take?
I hate online teaching. I resent it completely because it's very ineffective. If you can blend it, it's much more effective, because if it's purely online learning and teaching, it demotivates the teacher and the students. And but it is easy to switch. Now it has become very easy for us to switch to a digital platform if there is a COVID or a war or some uncertainty. It's very easy now, because we are used to it now. So today or tomorrow, if there is a crisis, an emergency, we can easily switch. Thanks to pandemic for that. But the effectiveness part is still a question, because we have created a group of students who are completely out of touch, be it the core principles, the respect, we see, I have my son here, and I know how he has learned all throughout this pandemic and the difference it has brought into his lifestyle. Now I'm forced to give the gadgets to him because that's how he has learned. So in my perspective, online learning is good if it's blended, not if it's purely online. And if you think about MOOCs and other online platforms, it's going to increase because we are used to it. So all that I want is innovativeness in it, like how you're going to measure the effectiveness, how effective it is, what can bring the effectiveness. Maybe it can be an interaction between the teacher and the student with the videos on, or some games or something like that, where the student engage a lot. It's not that all the videos are off and the teacher talks. That's worse than the traditional classroom. So it's not going to stop here, it's going to continue, but we need to take all the efforts to bring in more student engagement into it. Yeah.
Great points you shared there, Zena and Dr. Anu. So let's move on to the third key question. So what are the worldwide challenges for education in terms of emergency?
Yes, so there's a lot of challenges when it comes to emergency. When we're discussing global education, I think we saw that firsthand during the COVID pandemic. A lot of the world was not prepared for a pandemic to hit when it did. And it put back a lot of countries, not just economically, but educationally as well. A lot of students lost time, critical years that they needed to learn core curriculum, because there wasn't really many systems put in place to supplement the type of education that was lost because of the systems that had to get shut down, schools that didn't have the resources to teach students remotely. And every country is different. We're referring to global education, right? So this is the broadest, one of the broadest topics that we can discuss. There's first world countries, second world countries, third world countries, and then there are schools that mimic third world countries and first world countries, So if I'm going to discuss one system, maybe the United States, right? 1 in 10 students in the United States did not have technology that they needed to remotely learn during the pandemic. So some kids just were not going to school, which is obviously a very sad thing. And then there's also like the health crisis that was hit as well. If people are not healthy, they can't learn. And during the pandemic, people were getting sick constantly. They were losing time, especially as children. If they are sitting out of school, even if they're staying home, if one person caught COVID, nobody could go to school, nobody was going to work, everyone in the house got sick. And for some people, it took a long time to recover. They were having complications after that, and they lost a lot of time from school. There was a pandemic, emergency response pandemic system that was put in place, and then it was lifted when a new administration went into office, and I'm obviously referring to the United States. So unfortunately, a pandemic did hit during that time, and the country wasn't prepared. And for a first world country, that's really bad, right? Because a system that should have been able to withstand something like that wasn't able to. and it put the country behind drastically. So, and people are still suffering from it, educational systems are still suffering from it, and educationally, a lot of, educationally, it still has a very negative impact, even up until this day, so.
To need to talk about the emergency, it need not be global warming or climate change, it can be war. Whatever we are seeing right now, it's all emerged out of the war between Russia and Ukraine. So once the pandemic has finished, then we are faced with the next challenge. We don't know what's going to happen next year. Recession was once in 10 years, as per the business cycle. Now it is recession every 3 years. So the challenges are increasing day by day. Uncertainty is, there every day. But how much we are prepared for that, it's always a question, because every time we face a new challenge. Okay, so I believe that agility to switch between all these situations is what we need to create. Because otherwise we will have students who are affected mentally, physically, they're affected, and we're not able, or we don't know how to cope with that. We don't know how to give them feedback. So I feel that in case of these emergencies, we need to be well prepared, like how the teams are, like different emergency teams are, and agility is the key word here.
I think you've answered the next question, is like, has COVID really prepared us to be ready for future worldwide disruptions?
I say too much preparedness, actually. Like we switched on to online learning faster. Now it doesn't take much time to go back to online classes or the online setup. We are much prepared. Infrastructures are done. We have seen the rise of Zoom and Google Meet and Skype. Before that, 2019, most of the people, they didn't know how to use this, right? But now everyone, even a small kid, can easily switch into online learning. So I say COVID-19 has made us very prepared for any types of online learning.
Zena, would you like to add something?
Yeah. I think when it comes to crisis and emergencies, you can never be fully prepared. But I think the fact that COVID hit so drastically and caught people off guard, I do think that it will be made a priority in the future to make sure that we are prepared for future pandemics, or if circumstances arise that require online learning, I do think it prepared us for that at least. And in a lot of cases, it did allow us to implement a system that is more convenient in some ways, not just for schooling, but for work as well. So I do notice there's a hybrid now, people doing things in person, but they do things online now as well. And it saves time. You don't have to transport all the time. You save money on gas if you can do things remotely. And then it also brings different groups of people together. You don't always have to be in the same room to have a meeting or work on a project. And it's something that people didn't always see as an option before the pandemic.
Okay, great points. So I think we'll move on to the solutions. We've already had a great discussions about the challenges and the struggles. So what do you think are the solutions to the economic, environmental, and emergency issues individually and combined? Dr. Anam?
I think more flexibility in the system, that's most wanted, and more resourceful. The student, the teacher, begin the same, from the university perspective, the teachers and the system should be more resourceful, because we are having students with more problems than ever before. They're having mental, physical issues, and when it comes to the university campus, they might not share this with anyone. So we have more marginalized students who do not talk about their experience. They are socially invisible. So we need to open up. We need to enhance our system where we make our students talk to us comfortably. That's the most important point, because challenges are not going to finish. It's not going to end. Every day it will be a new challenge. So we need to have a very flexible environment, open environment, very inclusive environment. It's not just traditional classroom where the teacher talks and students listen. It is not going to work. If we want our students to engage, if we want our students to participate and collaborate, that's how they are going to grow. We have seen all these panels talking about how technology is very important in today's world, right? So if we are not embracing technology, if we as staff, we as faculty, if we are not embracing technology, and if we are only commending that the students are using it way too much, it is not going to solve any problem. We need to teach them how to use it. We need to be firm. We need to make systems in which we are open and they use technology when it's needed. We need to teach that, like how they need to ethically use it. It should be there all throughout the curriculum. Traditional classrooms should shift to this kind of a culture. We embrace technology. We are very open to students. We hear them. We give them solutions based on their shoes, not from our shoes. We are old. We are very old because this 2-3 years had made us 50 years back old, because technology has pushed these 3 years just fast, like next 10 years. So there is a big generation gap between the faculty and the students. So now the real change needed is us. If we are going to talk from our perspective, like how we studied in school and how we studied in college, it's not going to work out. So we need to embrace technology. We need to be more open up. We need to encourage our students to talk. More open campus, okay? And that will help us to face all these economic challenges, economic, social, culture challenges, because nothing is going to stop. We only need to be prepared. And this is the preparedness we need. And the diversity part is increasing day by day. We are seeing new culture, new type of people, different types of problems. If we do not have an open mind, if we are not able to be tolerant to others, that is another problem. So the traditional culture, traditional system should be changed to be more inclusive, this diversity which we are having. That's it.
I think discussing solutions is always important when we're discussing issues for things. So we can identify problems, talk about solutions, but it really means nothing if we don't put those solutions into action, right? So I am a public health professional. I always create public health models. Creating a structure and having the resources to actually carry out those systems, like the systems that we put together, is very important. So resources, structure, that is what these solutions are basically based off of. And creating models and actually carrying them out. You can't always talk, you actually have to do.
Okay, so we've talked about this flexible campus, Dr. Anu, as you were saying. Just a last question from my side is this concept really in place right now anywhere in the world? If yes, what has been the impact?
There is a quote which says that if you love a person, you allow that person to live in the way they want. Let others live. This is as simple as that concept. The concept of open or flexible environment means you allow another person to live in the way they want. Respect, no compromise. You being able to tolerate and respecting them as a human being, not based on their culture, not based on their language, not based on their skin, just based as a human being is what is needed. And this is something which I was talking about, open environment, open culture. So if you want somebody to grow, if you want somebody to contribute, if you want somebody to do well, just allow them to be in the way they want. Don't interfere, don't make any comments, don't scrutinize, okay? Just allow them to develop. Because time is a factor. Everybody will get molded, okay, during that course. So when I talk about open culture, open system, this is what I meant.
Can I add to that? Sure. So open cultures are very important, I agree. I think that a lot of schools are understaffed and that's a really big issue. So we can, talk about how we want people to be open and go to their administration and go to their teachers and express their issues and concerns, but it doesn't really mean anything if nothing is going to take place or like action is not taking place. And sometimes people don't want to address certain issues because they don't know how, and then other times they just don't have time. I think a lot of schools, one of the biggest issues is that they just don't have a lot of time to really, really carry out their jobs in the best way possible because, resources are scarce in a lot of different places. And I think once it becomes a culture that things don't actually get handled, then people are reluctant to be open in like university settings or school settings. So we have to address the root of the issues as well before we can create those solutions.
Thank you, Zena. Thank you, Dr. Anu. So we have the floor open to question and answer to the questions from the audience. Yes?
Okay, so thank you very much for the insight. So I'm wondering, now that we're talking about more technology being used and blended type of learning, do you see the participation of female, either women or girls, to continue to increase, or would it be more like a challenge to see more female participation?
In technology?
To have more opportunities, actually.
It depends on the country, I think. I think globally in general, there has been a shift in female leadership. I know in the US, in the medical field, there's so many women going to medical school. There's even more female doctors that are being produced recently than there have been in previous years. And then countries like Argentina, from years back, like there have been women in leadership. I know they have had a female president, and I think leadership, right, and the leaders in the government, they do represent a lot of what the population looks like. So, and people follow the leader. So if they see female leaders on TV, they see them in their schools, they see them in high spaces, they tend to follow suit. So I have seen an increase. And then there are certain fields where there are not a lot of women. There are fields that are very male dominated, like in business, tech, I think still has predominantly males. I know the other day you were the only woman on your panel. Congratulations. So, but yeah, I do think there is an increase in female professionals.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Yes?
Do you think, good afternoon, do you think that education for the differently abled, economically, does it always have to depend on charity, or can it be made sustainable? So let's say if you have an institution working with the differently abled, persons with disabilities, persons with disabilities, then would you, do you think that such an institution would have to perpetually depend on charity or corporate social responsibility, or can it be made sustainable economically? Yeah.
For a university, for that matter, like if you see it in terms of CSR, the corporate social responsibility, it's a social responsibility. And if you are teaching these type of students or encouraging these students to get education, it's something good for them as well. You can see it as a corporate social responsible activity and also something sustainable. But, for normal universities as well, there are students differently able. Now we are seeing more of it, not like before, like universities are not rejecting these type of students now. We are seeing students with ADHD or even blind students are there in business schools now. So it's not purely an act of social responsibility. Now university is embracing it as part of inclusivity. And I think that's going to increase in the future as well, because we have a lot of technology now. So for example, if a student who cannot write, he can dictate, for example, and the computer will type. So because of the technology, our students are more empowered, who have problems, and it's going to be something very natural for all these type of university to have a recruitment of these kind of students. So it's not purely a social, charitable thing. It can be something routine as well in the future.
And then it's also becoming the law for these accommodations to be met in a lot of places. It depends on the country. Like I said, we're talking about global education, and every country has a different system. But I do know that there have been laws put in place in the United States where schools have an obligation to accommodate students with disabilities. And it's really up to the individual as well if they want to go into a field where they do need accommodations, because it might be difficult. So you have to consider that as well.
Hi, thank you for the insights. And as you have seen, the pandemic has impacted many countries in terms of economics and the school education itself. And there are countries where there is a huge impact and loss of education and access to the education. Many students still do not have access to the quality education. How do you see that these challenges are the access to education and the quality education, in terms of there is a need for 69 million teachers all around the world? How do you see overcoming these challenges for education in terms of access to education as well as the quality of education and the need for skilled teachers in the school?
Thank you for your question. So it really boils down to education being made a priority in a lot of nations and systems. Like we said, if we're going to talk about solutions, we have to find the root of the issues and actually put those solutions into practice. I think it's going to take a very long time to build those systems and truly address these challenges, because it requires so many resources. Even some of the best schools still do have challenges, but definitely over time, if it is made a priority, I do think we can get to a place where educational systems are stronger and there are not as many challenges. Until we do live in a society or a world where there aren't as many socioeconomic gaps, there will be educational challenges as well, because resources are not distributed equally. So in order to fill those gaps, it's kind of a cycle. Education has to be strengthened so that people can build skills and then contribute to their societies. And it's kind of difficult because there is so many variation within countries and between different countries. Some of the nations that do have the strongest educational systems are socialist countries. Everybody does contribute, but then the resources are redistributed very evenly. But if you live in a society where there is a lot of socioeconomic variation, it's kind of hard to distribute resources evenly when they're not coming in evenly as well. So it's going to take time to really get to that place where those challenges are not as rampant.
Just one question, and then we'll come to you. We'll come to you later. Yeah.
Not really a question, but a response to the brother who has a school. One thing that is very sustainable in schools is if you have a business model, if you create a product or a curriculum, or invest in endowments or strip malls to kind of lead into the capital coming from that to sustain your school. And that's something that we've done across the US with several private schools, is that they have either a curriculum that they sell and that they get royalties for, and then that sustains the school on the back end so that you're not constantly having fundraisers or a charity drive to sustain the school. So just wanted to add to that.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yes. One last question. Yes.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. It was really amazing here, all of you. From the perspective of you being teachers at a global platform, educators, how do you view the educational capability and strength of students from India? I would like you to reflect on that, because that helps me create an environment, a system where we can figure out what best needs to be handed over to them back there.
Is it for India specifically?
It's specifically for India at this point of time? If you have any reflection of teaching Indian students or talking to your fellow staff members. So do you have any reflection when you see the Indian student in your campus? Do you find that they are strong enough with the kind of educational background that they have, the kind of system they've come out of? Do you think they're strong enough to be able to sort of imbibe their semels into the global education world? Yeah.
I have taught many Indian students in an international setup, actually.
Exactly.
Our students from India are very good in numbers, very good when it comes to commerce, economics, statistics, but they are too shy to talk.
Yeah.
When it comes to presentation, when it comes to pitching an idea, they're not confident about themselves, but it takes at least 1 or 2 years, and it makes a big difference for them. So these students who are very good in numbers, after 2 years, they'll start doing great presentations. They change their perspective completely different. So I've seen that. So I will say that Indian students, even though they come as shy, when they get an international platform and, interacting with international students, they change a lot. They like teamwork, they're very prompt about it, and they put a lot of hard work. But all that they need is to come out from that shyness.
Right.
The communication part is something which we are not teaching in the Indian curriculum. I think that is a big gap. We are not allowing our students to talk, express their ideas. They learn a lot they learn, actually. The curriculum is so heavy, and they are very knowledgeable, but at the same time, expression part is very limited.
So do you think if we put down the sort of heaviness in the curriculum a little less, will that be adequate enough for them to be sitting in the global classrooms? Because if we create that little, place in the glass, so we can probably fill that water of communication in there.
Yeah, the communication part is something which needs to be taken care of.
And if we sort of put the syllabus down by about 10% or 20%.
Our students have learned about the classics, Shakespeare classics and all. They know about it, they know poems, but they are not, easily communicating with others. That's something I see it as a big gap, actually. It can be because we are more shy in nature, and we are more family-oriented and more collective, and we are more comfortable with our own society, and we don't talk much. And in India is a country with many languages, so we are used to our own language, and we don't talk much of English. So I think you need to give a good platform for our Indian students to talk.
Sort of communicate,
yes,
and be more open.
Yes,
Yeah,
to present,
yeah.
to talk, to communicate, and give them more confidence. Confidence is something very important. Public speaking. Many of these schools are doing it now. They're embracing this change, and students are, using it as an opportunity, and they're getting more global, getting into the global arena. And that should be what we need to focus on.
Thank you so much. Would you like to probably share if you have any experiences?
Well, I think it also just depends on where, what country or what community. Community is very important. Where I'm from, there is a very large Indian population, and they're not very shy.
Yeah, because I think the culture there is very open, and they've been brought up into that culture, so they've imbibed those values and, sort of expression.
According to Hofstede's culture, students who are in India, Asia, Middle East, they are more shy, they are more into a collective nature. But the US is more of a direct environment where you have more self-regulated behavior, we depend on our family more than, and society more than our own.
Yeah.
So that makes a big difference, where you are,
Perfect, perfect.
And that's why diversity is important. Like when institutions make an effort to attract certain types of students so that there are communities in schools where people can be themselves. It's great to integrate and get to know people from different cultures, but it's always nice that if there are people from a similar background as you, because they have a lot of commonalities. So if we're talking about Indian students, if they go to a school where there are other Indian students, they can support each other and bring their culture wherever they go.
Perfect, perfect. One last question. You being an Indian, how much do you think, so if we talk in terms of the syllabus curriculum development, so when we have things like history, so, according to me, it could be just about 2 pages for them to understand a particular thing, whereas that is a lot of elaboration. And then I feel that a lot of students, like in maths, they don't want to do a trigo in a 9th or a 10th grade, and they're made to do that. So do you think that if we make specialization a little earlier, instead of probably a 9th or a 10th a little earlier, do you think that will make more sense, giving them a little idea and if they want to pursue? So this is very so specifically in terms of the Indian education system. So do you think that they'll be able to match the global standards if we reduce the syllabus in terms of the magnanimity and the I would say the depth of it? Will that be okay with that?
Yes, the curriculum is so heavy. They learn their native language, how to read, write, and then the literature. Then they learn Hindi. Then we have a huge history as well.
Exactly.
But the importance we give on life skills, for example, how to do financial things, they don't know.
Absolutely.
Communication, they have no clue.
I think even at times things like emergency management, probably I don't know about other countries as much of, but then I feel that back there, at times a +2 grade student will not be able to do what we are expected, So yeah.
I feel the Indians are the Indians are the most learned in terms of their history. They learn a lot of history from class 1 till they graduate.
Right.
History is like a biggest part there. We don't need to learn this much of history.
Yeah. So because I asked these things so that we can put forth these suggestions in front of the policymakers. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for your inputs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
More than the curriculum and specific nationality, it is more on the pedagogy, how we implement that curriculum. So more or less the curriculum in most of the subject, whether it's an international curriculum, whether it's American curriculum or UK curriculum and coming from any European curriculum, the content-wise, it's almost the similar. The difference is how we implement, how we teach, and how we assess the student. If we are putting more focus on knowledge and knowledge testing, that is where we need to change how we impart the education. As if we teach the same content based on a competency side, on a competency model, or we involve a lot of communication, presentation in delivering that curriculum, or even the testing of that curriculum, if we ask our student to speak, to give a presentation, that will build a lot of communication skills. So it's not the nationality or it's the curriculum, it's more the content, the culture, and how the teachers, the school, the context, how the pedagogy of teacher itself. So if teachers are still teaching in a way where they are teaching as a knowledge giver rather than facilitating the knowledge or becoming a mentor or a guide to the student, so that impacts. So that needs to be changed rather than reducing the content or increasing the content. More than that, we need to enhance our teacher education system, how we teach teachers and how we evaluate teachers, and we look at the teachers, how they are teaching in their classroom. What is the pedagogy adapted by these teachers, and how the schools are supporting incorporating various technologies to deliver those curriculum. So I think that would enhance the communication skills and bringing them outside the shyness and all other aspects with I
agree with you. Even the Chinese students, they're also very good in math and all these numeric skills, but they're very shy. So if we are not talking about Indians, and if we take Asians in total, all of them are like the same. So as you said, the pedagogy, experiential learning, design-based education, all of this should be part of the curriculum.
And then making sure that as we're developing the curriculum, we're making sure that they can apply the material. The point of learning, it's great to have knowledge and to learn a bunch of facts, but you have to actually apply the material because they has to translate into skills. You know, we want to create like valuable societal individuals or citizens. So applying the material is very important. And I think there's a lot of emphasis put on test taking all the time. Test taking, a lot of the time, is just a way to weed people out, but it requires so much effort. Instead of actually learning to build skills, students, it's testing memory, and it's also, there's also test-taking skills that you have to build as a young student, but it's not very like applicable to what you're going to do in your career.
Need to impart the employability skills needed for 21st century, like as they said, the speaking, communication skills, the most important skill needed by the industry itself, and to be successful in professional life. So all those things has to be imbibed within the curriculum, how you deliver that curriculum.
Absolutely. Communication skills are so important. If you are sitting in a cubicle for hours and hours and hours, granted you will learn so much material, but if you're awkward, you know, it's not very good. If you have a job where you're working with people and you don't know how to talk to those people, you don't know how to make those people feel comfortable, it can be a waste. So, you know, just creating like a holistic curriculum is important. We want to, I mentioned the other day, absorb as much material as you can as a student, especially starting at a young age, because you're like a sponge, but it has to be balanced at the same time.
All right. Thank you so much. I think we've gone a little bit over time. Sorry about that. But thank you so much, Dr. Anu, Zena. Thank you for the wonderful questions, and thank you for our lovely audience for listening to us today. And the floor is back to you now.
Thank you so much. Please put your hands together for our fantastic panelists. Thank you, ladies. That was absolutely wonderful.